Oi! Welcome to the San Jose Hockey Now podcast. I'm Sheng Peng, editor-in-chief of San Jose Hockey Now. I am live from London, not London, Ontario, but London, England. Anyway, find me on Twitter, Sheng_Peng, on Blue Sky, Sheng Peng. Also find us on Instagram, San Jose Hockey Now, and of course, find my work at MEC Sharks.
How's it going, everyone? Zubair Jawanji again. Happy to be here, co-host of San Jose Hockey Now, and find me at San Jose Ice. I'm rink ratting all the time still, so I'll be over there. Right now, I'm in northern Minnesota on vacation at the family cabin, and it's beautiful out here, as you guys can see. And Shangers, how's London?
It's going great. I did want to mention too, Keegan is not here today. He is working, but he will be back with us next week. Actually, just a little tease. We have a very, how many more times can I say very, Zubair? Very exciting episode planned next week. No exaggeration. Zubair knows what's going on, and he knows that it is very exciting. But anyway, we're going to we'll talk about that more a little bit later. But before we do, let's talk a little bit about, let's talk about London a little bit. I've been walking a lot. I've been checking out all the sites. My first time here. I am a big literary guy, which some of you guys know. And so I've been going to I'm going to John Keats's house, Charles Dickens' house. One of the things I love about London is you walk around and you just look on Google Maps and you're like, oh, I'm 10 minutes away from William Blake, very famous poet back then, his burial spot. Oh, I'm 20 minutes away from where Percy Bysshe Shelley lived. And just little things like that about England, about London are very cool. That you just walk around anywhere. Actually, the street that I'm staying on, I'm in Camden. Apparently, Charles Dickens, he lived here when he was a kid. The same street that I'm on right now. I don't know what house he lives at. I gotta look that up later. But anyway, so I am very excited about London. I'm very excited about this episode, and I'm very excited about our very next episode.
Yeah, I love it. Are you? Have you been feeling inspired? For those who don't know, Shang, a writer himself, obviously, more than just a beat writer for the Sharks. Any poetry? You writing any poetry out there?
No, I haven't written any poetry out here, but it has been very sobering. Sobering maybe is not the right word, but when I was younger, coming to England, coming to London, it's my first time here, was a dream. And so to visit all these kind of the poets, their houses, where they worked, that really interests me. And just to be there is almost religious for me. Actually, speaking of that, I also went to Westminster Abbey, and there's a poet's corner there. And that's where a lot of poets are buried, and a lot of them are honored. Writers, not just poets, Shakespeare, Jane Austen, and the list goes on. Just the greats of English literature. And so when I was younger, I thought that, hey, maybe I would be one of those people. Maybe I have a bust in Westminster Abbey one day. But no, instead, I'm here talking about Macklin Celebrini.
Well, I mean, harness some of that deep-rooted Sharks pain and write us a good poem while you're out there.
That's a good call. Yes, I will do that one day.
Yeah, exactly. All right, awesome. Well, we got a great show today. And actually, before I jump into that, I got to recommend a place. Have you been to 8-Nothin But? You got to look that up. Great blues bar in London. One of my favorites. 8-Nothin But. Obviously the blues, but check that out.
Oh, hey, I actually went to a fun one last night too. Blues Kitchen in Camden. So great music. They're doing kind of like old school combined with like bluesy versions of like newer songs, like Empire State of Mind, but also bluesy versions of classics like The Doors, Light My Fire. So that's kind of more up my alley. So I really had a good time there last night. But anyway, before though we get to our show and stop talking about our vacations here, vacations only show, like you said earlier, let's talk about Bring Hockey Back. So Bring Hockey Back. Bring Hockey Back's our sponsor, bringhockeyback.net. We love them as a sponsor. Anyway, you can get great t-shirts. They have Macklin Celebrini. They have Joe Thornton t-shirts. They've got custom hockey jerseys there too. Bringhockeyback.net. Also, coupon code San Jose Hockey Now. Get 15% off. So anyway, Bring Hockey Back, bringhockeyback.net. Go there right now.
Still waiting for my shirt. Bring Hockey Back. Come on. I'm a co-host now. Get me on. Get me a shirt. All right. Well, we got an awesome show today. There's a couple things, Sheng, something that you and I talk a lot about is obviously, what steps do the Sharks really need to take to get back into playoffs? And obviously we're not thinking Stanley Cup yet, just that next step of getting into the postseason.
Yep.
And, you know, when we're talking about that a lot, you know, there's a lot of details of what you got to do. And it's things that we discuss and we find really interesting in the current state of the Sharks. And, you know, really looking back into recent cup winners like the 2012, 2014 Kings or the 2010, 13, and 15 Blackhawks, and even recent cup winners like the Panthers and Lightnings, who did it a little differently in the sense that they were a lot more like the Thornton era Sharks that were really close, but, you know, added a couple of key ingredients to get them over the top. So, really interesting topic, and we have a great guest as well that's going to speak to that topic today. So, Shay, want to tell us a little bit about our guest?
Well, I just want to reemphasize that this is really, really important. I think a lot of conversations about the Sharks, it's easy. The Sharks have been so bad so long that you want to imagine the day that the Sharks win a Stanley Cup. You thinking 5 steps ahead, but we're talking about the next step. We're not talking necessarily about 5 steps ahead here. How can the Sharks just get back to respectability, like legitimate respectability, and not just being number one on prospect pools and all that kind of stuff, right? But how to be a good team again. Maybe not a great team yet, but a good team first. And I think that's a really, really important kind of under-discussed topic. And so that's why we're going to have Jesse on here. And Jesse here to talk about the Kings. The Kings did it like the Sharks are trying to do. The Kings had a long rebuild from 2006 to 2010. They missed the playoffs. And in that time, they drafted kind of the cornerstone players, Kopitar, Doughty, and Quick. And anyway, so 2010 is the first time the Kings make the playoffs, and they get bounced in the first round twice. And of course, Sharks fans remember 2011 in the playoffs when the Sharks beat the Kings in the first round. I think that's a game. I don't remember which game, but it came back from 4-0 deficit. You have Joe Thornton swimming on the ice, right? Maybe the trademark or the cornerstone signature Joe Thornton moment in teal there. So anyway, that step was really important. The Kings didn't go from being out of the playoffs to winning the Stanley Cup in 2012. That in between stuff matters quite a bit. And so how did the Sharks again just get to that next step? And anyway, the reason why we're having Jesse on, Jesse's a friend of mine. Jesse has been a Kings fan since the mid-'80s. You probably have heard of Jesse, especially if you were really into the Kings-Sharks rivalry back when it mattered. And Jesse has hosted all the Kingsmen podcasts since 2012. So he's, I think, a great guy to kind of talk about this topic.
Awesome. All right. Well, before we get to Jesse, let's touch up on a couple of the Sharks news and notes. So, Sheng, what can you tell us about the new deal, Sharks staying in town till 2051?
Yeah, and that's arguably the biggest news of anything this whole summer. The Sharks basically signed a free agent deal to stay in San Jose for the next 25 till 2051. That's actually bigger than William Eklund's 3-year contract or discussions of Macklin. I made a mistake last week. Macklin Celebrini can sign an 8-year contract. So Macklin Celebrini's extension coming up. So arguably the Sharks just staying here, that matters the most. But anyway, great news for Sharks fans. We're going to see how it all kind of shakes out in terms of where the new arena is, when the Sharks play in that new arena, because part of the deal is, besides the Sharks staying in San Jose till 2051, they are also going to the city of San Jose, and the Sharks are going to share the cost. Most of it will be the city, but they're going to share the cost of renovating SAP Center to get it up to quote unquote code. And so anyway, so they're going to do that over the next decade or so. So I'm interested to see how the renovations will look, but I'm more interested in the new arena and what that's going to be like in the new arena district. So anyway, stay tuned. I think a lot of details for this. Obviously, they just kind of agreed, or city council voted for this. And I think that the specifics of it and how it's going to play out, we're still not sure. One of the interesting things is that the city and the Sharks have to agree on a new arena site/district by September 2027. What does that mean for SAP Center? Where is this new arena district going to be? Who knows? But it's all kind of, okay, we're going to have a lot of Sharks news in the next couple of years, a lot of arena news.
Yeah, absolutely. I think two things that were kind of interesting about the deal, too, was I heard a quote by Jonathan Becker talking about how, one of the concerns of any time of these big budget arenas in any city, obviously the city is always wondering what's going to happen. Where's that money coming from? Taxpayers are really reluctant to pay for entertainment, even if it is bringing profit back to the city. But I thought it was interesting that Jonathan said that, Hasso, I guess, green lighted like, hey, if your concern is the budget of the city, we can make that go away. and so I thought that was kind of neat. And also just in terms of the fan experience, the mayor is talking a little bit about how he wanted things to be a little bit more integrated, something Sheng, you and I have talked about with, really fun fan experiences in cities like Nashville, where, everything's right there and outside and San Jose SAP being a little further away. So they really talked about being able to do that, even like an open carry policy. So, you can have your drink and just walk up to the arena outside. So I think lots of exciting things to come and great news all around. So yeah, let's talk about the other little bit of news, or no news actually, with Michael Misa. What have you been hearing about Michael Misa and him not signing his ELC?
Okay, well, I just took a drink there, but it was not beer, so yeah, I know I'm in England. Anyway, so with Michael Misa, I'm still of the belief that he's going to sign his ELC. I have a theory about this, which I will share because it's going to be possibly relevant in a couple of days here. But okay, I'll go with the theory first. My theory is that the reason why it's taken so long is because the Sharks are this is just me, educated guess. So, but I will say though that I have heard from chiefly from Marco D'Amico, who writes for he used to write for Montreal Hockey Now. Right now he is at rg.com. And anyway, yes, RG Media, rg.com. So anyway, Marco has been telling me since June that he's heard that the Sharks are obviously going to move Price, and connecting the dots that the Sharks make a lot of sense. And I agree with Marco. Granted, this is more in the educated guess phase for me. I haven't been able to like hammer it down, or I would have written about it. But because though it's going to be very relevant. Let's see. It is, sorry, my times are mixed up here. So it's August 31st, 2 p.m. Pacific right now. So tomorrow, Carey Price is due a bonus, and the Canadiens are going to pay that out. And then Carey Price still, even though the Canadiens have paid out this bonus, which I believe, I don't know if you can look this up. I think it's like a $5 million bonus cash. It's a very, very significant bonus. So that's why Price's contract hasn't moved yet. But Price has 1 year left on his deal. It is 10 million AAV, right? Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, look it up. So he's owed 5.5 million signing bonus
tomorrow.
September 1st. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's his AAV?
10.5.
Okay. So so the Canadiens are a lot closer to contending than the Sharks. So it makes a lot of sense for the Sharks to take on this deal. But here's a problem though, and this is going to be related to Michael Misa. So the Sharks are currently at 49 of 50 contracts. That includes Logan Couture. That does not include Sam Dickinson or Leo Selin-Wallinius right now. They're not part of the 41 of 50 because their contracts, number one, they can slide, but they can slide and they can go back to, I think the role is junior or Europe. So basically what happens is I think everyone assumes that Dickinson is going to start the season with the Sharks. So that contract is going to be one of those 50. Well, Wallinius, we know though, is going back to Sweden, so that contract will slide, and he's going back to Europe. So that contract will not be part of the 50. So anyway, right now, for all intents and purposes, and I've spoken with Puckpedia, Hart Levine, so he's the man. He's the cat man. So I'm in England, tax man, cat man. Get it? He's the cat man. So anyway, so I verified all these details with him, just checking on things. So for all intents and purposes, the Sharks are full up on contracts right now because you're assuming Dickinson is 50 of 50. So at the moment, they can't sign. I mean, yeah, I don't know if you can be over contracts in the offseason or not. I don't know about that part of it, but I know that if the season started tomorrow and Dickinson's on a team, that the Sharks cannot have Misa on their team because that would be 51 contracts, right? Okay, so how does this Carey Price thing work in? So Montreal right now, they have plenty of space for contracts. I think right now, according to Puckpedia, they're at 43 of 50. I don't know if that's their exact total, but in terms of just like all intents and purposes, right? Obviously, the Sharks on Puckpedia says 49 to 50, but we have a Sam Dickinson contract that is until they send them back to juniors needs to be accounted for. So anyway, so how does Carey Price work into it? Well, I have this again. This is just a theory, but the Sharks have two contracts I look at that are very, very clear that these are prospects that have unfortunately just run out of time, whether it be because of injuries like Gannon Larocque injuries or Artem Guryev, who just hasn't developed quite as the player that the Sharks are hoping when they gave him a contract in ELC. So Guryev has had he's had shoulder injury, he's had injuries too, but also too just last year in the ECHL he's being used as a forward. So this is not he was drafted as a defenseman. So this is a guy who's not going necessarily in the path that you want as a prospect. So doesn't make sense for the Sharks. And this is just again speculation, right? But my speculation, let me add. But I have heard from besides Marco, another reporter, I think I can say his name, Nicolas Cloutier in Montreal, who's saying that he's hearing a lot of vibes with the Sharks and just picking up Price's contract. So does this deal make sense to you then, Zubair, that the Sharks take on Price's contract? Sharks have plenty of cap space. They part with two contracts in Guryev and Larocque, guys that they won't have a future in Montreal either. Just Montreal is just taking on the contracts to give the Sharks a little bit of space there. The Sharks also signed Misa in that, so Misa would become their 50th contract. If you do the math there, they in effect would be their 50th contract, and Montreal might toss in maybe a 4th round pick. I think they have an extra 4th round pick next year. That's what Marco was telling me. So, so does that kind of deal make sense to you?
Yeah, I can see it. I like your theory. I can definitely see it. I would like a little bit more return because it's a significant cap hit. I mean, it's not a small amount. And I would like to see some comps for, inheriting that much cap relative to what you get, but I'd like higher than a 4th round. That's for sure.
Well, these days, though, the cap hit doesn't matter. I'm sorry. Yeah. Cap dumps, you don't get as much as you used to be able to because it's not a flat cap anymore. Other teams might be able to fit this in for a price. So it's just not the same market that it was before. And also, too, don't underestimate the value of getting rid of contracts here. There is a value to that the Sharks are alleviating contracts that they have zero need for, so they can bring in a contract that they want in Michael Misa. I wanted to add to that. I've heard that I think about a month ago or so, I said on the podcast that I had heard from a source that Misa had no interest in the NCAA. And over the last couple of weeks, I kind of checked on that. And this source, who I trust and is very tapped into the college scene, has told me that he has not heard of any schools taking visits from Misa. Now, I don't know if I don't know if that's normal or not. I don't know much about the NCAA hockey, the NIL recruiting process these days, but it seems to signal, though, that my source was correct originally, that there just isn't that interest from Misa in the NCAA path, that he wants to go to the NHL. He wants to try, as he has said, as Mike Guerrero has indicated from the beginning, that the Sharks are going to give him every best opportunity to make the NHL out of camp. And look, even small things, right? Like Michael Misa at a Giants game a couple days ago with Tyler Toffoli. Little things like that. They kind of signal that that's the direction. And so this is my theory. I think JD had something similar on it a couple days ago, but I will say that I didn't take this from JD. I swear. I thought about this a week ago. We just haven't recorded it in a while. So let's say with JD and I, great minds think alike. So, but in this case, though, that I do think that the contracts and Guryev and Larocque make the most sense to get rid of, and that kind of alleviates the space for you. And in terms of, like you asked about the return, I just think the market is low. Maybe it's a 3rd round pick. Maybe that feels a little better that does feel better than the 4th. But what I'm saying is, if you're expecting to get like a 1st round pick out of this or whatever, those days I think are done. So you're not going to get that. But if you get anything for it, it's a contract that the Sharks they can stomach easily. And Carey Price is going to be out the door. His contract, it's only a 1-year thing, so it's really just found money for the Sharks here. That whatever pick they get from the Canadiens in this hypothetical deal. So anyway, it is August 31st at 2 p.m. And so let's see. Let's see. Tomorrow, September 1st. It is Labor Day, September 1st. So I don't know if that's the news that Sharks will drop tomorrow during Labor Day. I hope not. I'm planning to go to the National Gallery tomorrow. Maybe it's the next day, September 2nd, when I'll be flying back from London to SFO. But we'll see. But I would think, though, that the news is going to kind of come fast and furious here, though. That it's going to just come very quickly. If it all happens as I am envisioning, Price trade, Misa contract, get Misa over to the rookie showcase in Washington, D.C. That's the upper deck thing that they do every year. That's celebrating in Smith. And I think Mukumadulin were a part of last year. Obviously, September 12th, that's the start of rookie faceoff. That really is the drop dead date that you need. If Misa's going to be here, he's got to be there for that. And he's got to be at rookie faceoff. But again, if Misa's already here taking in the Giants, that's one of those things that says Michael Misa isn't out there. You don't see pictures of Michael Misa at Ann Arbor checking out the campus. So
exactly. I guess also, just to add to that too, going back to the return for a potential cap dump from the Canadiens on Carey Price's bonus and contract. I think what's interesting there too is like how desperate are the Canadiens, and it looks like they're over cap by almost $6 million. So pretty desperate as well. So hopefully
I don't know how desperate they are, because I just feel like the market, there's teams that can take that on though, that AAV and just not think about it. So
yeah, that's fair. Well, great. No, thanks. Lots of great stuff there. So, all right. Well, that wraps up most of the news and notes for the week. Let's bring in our guest, Jesse Cohen. So Jesse Cohen, obviously Sheng had mentioned, a friend of his. And shall we?
Well, we're still waiting for Jesse. We're doing this radio style, so I just sent Jesse the link there. Jesse's been kind enough; he's been patient, waiting for us to send him the link. So anyway, though, before we get Jesse on though, so what do you think of Misa in terms of just? Do you think that he takes the center job from Will Smith by the end of the season? Because I think he does, actually.
Yeah. I think I brought that up on the last pod too. I think he projects better as a center as well. I think he just seems more responsible defensively and quicker to get out of the transition out of our zone. He's a little bit bigger in terms of height and I think a little bit more physically built than Will was last year. And just a little bit more defensively aware naturally. He really shined as center. So I think he steals it. That's a prediction I think I made last week too, and I'm sticking with it. And I think he's 2C by the end of the season, if he gets the same Will Smith treatment.
Right. Yeah. Well, we'll see about that. But anyway, I want to introduce our guest right now, Jesse Cohen. Zubair, actually, can you take it here?
Absolutely, Jesse Cohen. Find him on x.com/Kingsmen podcast. He's been host of All the Kingsmen, a Kings podcast since 2012, and as we mentioned earlier, been a Kings fan since the mid '80s. So here to speak as an expert on all the ups and downs. And on a personal note, Jesse's been fighting cancer over the last year and just went through his last round of chemo. So he's feeling great and really happy for his health and hoping for a clean bill of health in his future as well. So let's welcome Jesse.
Hey guys.
Hello, Jesse. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Very good. Well, Jesse, thanks for coming on last minute here. I did want to add with Jesse here that Jesse and I, we've been friends since. Well, we've known each other since basically when I was covering the Kings. So going back to 2014, 15, and Sharks fans, you might know Jesse from All the Kingsmen podcast, but as a blogger back then, when I didn't know anybody, Jesse was really nice to me. And also too, it's really, when I think about back then, 10 years ago, Jesse was a guy that I wanted to share my work because he had a big following already with his All the Kingsmen podcast. Guys Sharks fans, you guys might remember, or if we have any Kings listeners, old school Kings fans. I know a couple of you guys still, I think, follow me on Twitter, and obviously all you guys follow Jesse on Twitter. But anyway, though, he was the guy that I wanted to be sharing my work. Him and John Rosen, the Kings Insider, Royal Hap, if you guys remember those guys. And anyway, all that kind of stuff. So, Jesse, it's just so great to have you on. Sort of a little full circle for me to have you on because, well, now I'm here covering the Sharks, and you're still there doing a great job covering the Kings.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Sheng. And hello, Zubair.
Hey, nice to meet you.
You too.
Really excited for today's discussion and picking your brain about how the Sharks, get out of the cellar floor. So
it's not easy.
Exactly. So we've highlighted a couple of, 5 little bullet points that we wanted to get into today. And let's just start at the top of that. You have to learn how to play defense, essentially. If you want to make
yes, that's number one. And so let me give you guys some background to this, and then Jesse can kind of fill in some of the Kings' perspective too. So, okay. So the Sharks obviously are an awful defensive team. So the Sharks, let's see, they gave up 326 goals in 2023-24. They gave up 310 last year. They're both last place. And so how does this relate to the Kings? Well, the Kings, during their rebuild from 2006 to 2008, the Kings were young and skilled. They had players like Anze Kopitar, Alexander Frolov, Michael Camilleri, Patrick O'Sullivan, players like that, but they struggled to play coherent hockey. That's a nice way of putting it. Coherent hockey under Mark Crawford. They were almost a last place team both of those years. And anyway, in 2007-08, the last year under Mark Crawford, they gave up 263 goals. Not as bad as the Sharks, but pretty bad. And that was 28th in the league that year, 28th of 30 teams. So anyway, learn to play defense, Sharks. So enter coach Terry Murray in 2008-09. He replaced Mark Crawford. And this is from an LAKings.com article, but basically that Murray during training camp in 2008, he literally modeled defense for the team by painting 5 circles in the shape of a home plate on the practice ice. And this is a quote from Terry Murray. We focus on the defensive end, what I call home plate. That's what Terry Murray said during training camp. This is the mindset of what players have to have. Taking care of home plate and eliminating some of those grade 1 scoring chances is a priority, and that was the focus today. And so those dots that he drew on the ice, those dots, again, going back to Terry Murray, those dots are a reference point. When a puck is coming into your defensive zone, it is what I call home plate positioning. The prime scoring area is right there in front of the net below the hash marks. That is where we have to be defending. And so for the Kings, what happened the first year under Terry Murray? They had a 37 goals against improvement, gave up just 226, and jumped from 28th in the league to 11th in the league in defense. And they still weren't close to the playoffs, but they made it the next year. And so big part of it, obviously, is Terry Murray helping to teach the young kids how to play defense. Another part of it, obviously, too, is the players that you bring in. So they traded for Matt Greene, Jarret, Stoll, just solid all-around players. They signed Rob Scuderi. His first year with the Kings, he had 0 goals and 11 assists. He wasn't there for his offense, but he just was strong defensively. And so going back to the Sharks here, the question is, can Ryan Warsawski teach the Sharks to defend like Terry Murray did with the Kings? So anyway, let me give it to Jesse right here. His thoughts on this.
You left out 2 names, Sheng. Willie Mitchell.
Yep.
And Jonathan Quick. And, you don't need an all-star goaltender to be good defensively, but it sure helps. I've said this time and time again, one of the things that I was not aware of before the trade of Jack Johnson for Jeff Carter in 2012 was the concept of Corsi and the concept of possession. And so, I said only 2 names. I'm going to throw out some more names. Apologies. They also went ahead and got Justin Williams.
Sure.
And at the time they got Justin Williams, or maybe the year after, I remember reading somewhere that he and Pavel Datsyuk were the 2 leading possession players in the National Hockey League for the 5 seasons prior to that. So even if you weren't necessarily focused on defense, focusing on possession in the offensive zone prevents the opponent from breaking out. And we see it now with the Kings currently. Well, I guess they don't have Arvidsson anymore, but in previous iterations of this team, the line of Deneau, Arvidsson, and Moore were so aggressive on the forecheck, and their sticks were so active in turning the puck over when the other team was trying to break out of their own zone, that what should have been maybe a 10 or 15-second stretch in the offensive zone might turn into a line change with possession and hem your opponent back in their zone. So, I mean, it's more than just one or two players. You know, you mentioned Terry Murray laying out, you know, the circles on the ice. It's an organizational focus, and it has to come up and down the lineup.
Right. And for the Sharks here, so they signed Dmitry Orlov. They claimed Nick Leddy off of waivers. So it's maybe a little bit of a long shot because those players are a little older than Scuderi and Willie Mitchell were when they joined the Kings. But maybe those guys can kind of provide that veteran defense first presence like Scuderi and Willie Mitchell would do for the Kings. So hopefully.
Well, if I may, I'm not intimately familiar with the Sharks roster, but the one thing that I believe in more than just the individual talents of the component players on a roster is that timing plays a huge role in climbing out of the basement into the competitive window. And so the Sharks have, you know, you've got the forwards, right? You've got, you know, Celebrini, who I think is incredible. You've got Will Smith, you've got, you know, Eklund, you've got these young players, and you have Askarov in net, but you've got to sort of get everything has to build to an apex. And then there's a whole other conversation to be had about how do you maintain that competitiveness? Because as guys get older, if they're in support roles, they want more money, or they want, you know, to be promoted out of those support roles. Your veterans that are supporting, you know, age out or get injured. I mean, it's tough to maintain competitiveness, but you have to sort of time everything just right. Like you said about Orlov, and I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the other name you mentioned. Nick Leddy, right. You can't bring in two defensemen that are in their mid to late 30s to play with a bunch of 18-year-old forwards and expect that by the time those 18-year-old forwards are ready to be competitive, you know, season in, season out in a way to make deep runs in the playoffs, that those guys aren't going to be retired or, you know, or too old to really hang with them. I mean, that was the brilliance of bringing in Mitchell, Williams, Scuderi, Carter, Richards. You know, they brought in a host of, they being the Kings, brought in a host of guys that were all roughly the same age.
Like late 20-ish, right?
Yeah, to play the support roles to your Brown, Kopitar, Doughty, Voinov, Quick, etc. And so you had, you know, multiple layers of talented players up and down the lineup. You know, unfortunately, Willie Mitchell got hurt. Slava Voinov got deported. Mike Richards fell off a cliff, and then he seems fine, so I don't want to give credit to any rumors, but I mean, you know, the Kings tried, but I mean, Mike Richards was sent down to the AHL multiple times before the Kings tried to terminate his contract and got caught doing that. So what really happened to the Kings is they lost an entire tier of support players. You know, the names at the top and even at the bottom, I suppose, kind of stayed the same, right? Kopitar didn't go anywhere. Brown didn't go anywhere. Martinez stuck around. Doughty, Quick, Carter, right? A lot of these names, but they lost this entire, you know, middle class of talent and contract status players. And when I look at the Sharks, that's what's missing, right? I see the talent, the young talent, but I don't see a lot of solid support. And, you know, Askarov is great and all, but even the best goaltender we've seen, you know, throughout the league, if nobody's playing defense for him,
right,
he's going to get lit up eventually. So the Sharks have a good young core to build around, but it's going to require building.
Yeah. What kind of terms were they handing out to a lot of those like younger veterans that they brought on?
The one benefit that the Kings had, sorry to cut you off, but this is a topic I'm obsessed with, and I don't think Kings fans give it its due attention. One of the benefits the Kings had was that they had built a core of young players right at the moment that the 2004-2005 lockout happened. And so coming out of that lockout, there was the salary cap introduced for the first time, but they didn't correct for the loopholes that would inevitably be found. So they were able to add Richards and Carter at cap circumventing deals that would be disallowed in 2013. So in between their two cup runs, the league came in and said, no, you're not allowed to sign guys to 12-year deals to bring down the annual cap hit. Without that historical oddity, there's no chance the Kings have Kopitar as a first-line center, Richards as a second-line center, and then also, oh, by the way, Jeff Carter just hanging out on the wings waiting to replace Mike Richards. So I mean, the league has made it harder over the years to remain competitive for a long time, and I don't think they intended to do it, but I think one of the side effects of that is it's probably harder to climb out of the basement. You know, the Kings were able to do it because they already had Kopitar and Doughty still in place when they added, you know, the Kings sort of just ran the same playbook, but in reverse, right? The Kings had Kopitar and Doughty and Brown, and then they went and added younger players in that mid-level contract status, Deneau and Arvidsson and Edler, and then over the years, Fiala and more and other players like that. But now the Kings are sort of facing a different problem of like, well, okay, once your high profile, high cost players age out, how do you replace them? You know, if you replace them. So anyway, it was getting back to the Sharks. Sorry, I could talk about the Kings forever, but you guys probably here to talk about the Sharks. So, I mean, you know, Macklin Celebrini is entering his second year of his entry-level contract. So, okay, you've got 2 more years of Celebrini at cost control. And then I'm assuming like bridge contracts may or may not be a thing of the past, right? Because of we don't know what the new CBA is going to do to contract negotiations and how it's all going to work out. But let's say at the end of his ELC, Macklin Celebrini signs a 7-year deal at $10 million plus. Well, okay, you've just, you know, the window that used to be available to franchises where they're young players, young talented players, weren't gobbling up all of their cap space so that they could surround them with other talent, you know, it just becomes a lot harder. You're going to have to find, you know, mid-level players who overachieve or hope that somebody like Will Smith, I don't know, I always thought Will Smith was a winger, but he's listed as a center. What does he play usually?
Well, he was drafted as a center, but they moved him to wing in the second month of the season, and he stayed on wing the rest of the year, and that's where he had his most success. So is Will Smith a center or a winger? Actually, Zubair and I were just talking about it.
Sure.
TBD.
Came on. So it is indeed TBD.
All right. Well, then you've got to hope that, I don't know, somebody like Ty Dellandrea or somebody like that develops into that kind of 2C or 3C.
No, well, they have Michael Misa for that. So.
Oh, well, sure.
Yeah.
I can sit this one out. Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the trick. That's the trick. Like I said, is mastering the timing. And also, you know, and you can look at a team like Colorado, right? They lucked into getting an opportunity to add Kadri at the end of his contract status that wasn't paying him a ton, but now he makes too much to be helpful to anybody but a team where he's, you know, one of the big names. And then you have the problem of, well, is Nazem Kadri good enough to actually be the big name and the big earner? So it's tough, you know, it's tough. And I know a lot of fans, when people like me start talking about this kind of stuff, their eyes roll back in their heads and they go, oh, I don't care about the cap and I don't care about all this stuff. Why can't I just pay attention to who's good and who's not? And it's like, well, I wish that were the case, but it just isn't anymore. You do have to, if you really want to have a sense of what it's going to take and how teams need to navigate their reality, you have to at least be aware that these things exist, even if you don't want to get into the weeds on how they work.
So Jesse, let's bring us back a little bit to that period for the Kings as well. So we could draw some analogies to the Sharks. And, you know, when they were starting to hand out these longer term contracts, was it like established that the young core were like going to be great? Like the Dowdies, the Browns, that was determined, right? Like they are solid.
And Sheng can back me up on this. I mean, there was no doubt from Andrzej Kopitar's first game that he was a real NHL hockey player.
Yeah,
I mean,
look it up. He embarrassed Chris Pronger.
Yeah, and James
game.
Jaguar. His first goal is just an incredible goal where he dances Pronger and pulls Jaguar way out of the net. And I think Drew Doughty, I looked it up last year at one point. I think Drew Doughty played less than 20 minutes in his first game. And then I think never again for like 5 more years or something. And I think he's only played less, other than games where he's gotten injured. I think the number of games where he's played fewer than 20 minutes you can count on one hand. I mean, wow. You know, it took Brown a few years to become Dustin Brown, and it took Jonathan Quick half a year maybe, but by the time they were making the playoffs, you knew, okay, Jonathan Quick's their starting goalie. He's playing 72 games a year. Anze Kopitar is your legit number 1 center. Drew Doughty's your number 1 defenseman. And the Kings got really lucky as well, not only in acquiring Carter and Richards on cap circumventing deals, but drafting Slava Voinov, whose name is difficult to mention. They drafted him in the 2nd round the same year they drafted Drew Doughty. And he was incredibly underrated as a player. What he did was terrible, and there's no regret on having him self-deport back to Russia. But as a player, exclusively what he meant to the team on the ice, he was great, and they slow cooked him to the point where when he finally did join the team, he was unquestionably the 2nd pair right-hand side defenseman. And so on your top 2 pairs, you had Doughty and Voinov, same age, same comfortability playing the roles they were playing. And then you had Mitchell and Scuderi on the left side. 2 veterans who just, leadership, savvy, all the intangible words you want to throw out there. Sorry, it's a long way of answering your question.
We're gonna get to the Voinov part in a little bit. So again, we're talking about the kind of 5 things that, at least in my kind of research or whatever, that I think that the Sharks need to do to take that next step. And again, we're not talking about just making it to the Stanley Cup, because that's like 5 steps from now. We're talking about the next step of being a much better team, being a good team, maybe making the playoffs, kind of like the Kings did. And so number 1 step we have, again, learn to play defense. So we talked about that roundabout for a while here. So the second thing is, and this one was really interesting to me because I spoke with Jack Ferreira. He was a senior advisor of the Kings back in the Dean Lombardi era. And he said this was the thing that stood out to him about that era of the Kings. And so number 2 is be honest about your players internally. And I want to give kind of some background to that. But before I do, I did want to mention about Mike Richards, that Jack loves Mike Richards as a leader. Obviously, Richards' game declined for whatever reason that we don't have to get into right now. But if Mike Richards was the player that he was supposed to be when the Kings acquired him, he was Team Canada 2000. He was Team Canada player. He was supposed to be. He was a first line center that the Kings were acquiring to back up their other first line center, Anze Kopitar. And I think Richards was 27 too. He was the right age too. So if Richards was the player he was supposed to be, well, I'm sure you've heard this, Jesse, that Jack feels that the Kings had another Stanley Cup or 2 in them if Mike could have had the normal kind of aging curve.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in there. Sorry. So, I mean, yes, it's very convenient to look back and say if, but if Mike Richards was the player that everybody thought he was going to be, they probably never trade for Jeff Carter.
I don't know. That's the debate. Who knows, right? Because they still needed scoring.
They definitely don't trade for Marian Gaborik in 2014. Like, if things went, if my
they didn't trade that much for Gaborik though. So anyway,
no, I know, but the point is, like, everybody conveniently forgets that they fired Terry Murray in the middle of the season, the year they won the Cup, and hired Daryl Sutter, and there was talk of Sutter and Lombardi being fired if things didn't work out. So I mean, yeah, could they have kept going and won the Cup more times? Yes. And 2014 and 15, I think they missed the playoffs by less than a handful of points, and their record in the shootout was abysmal. And nobody saw Voinov getting deported, and sure, they could have. But one of my gripes with Kings fans and people who worked in and around the organization back then, they love to talk about this thing that they built as if it was this unassailable, brilliant, perfectly designed, perfectly plotted out construction. But my argument would be, if it was, it would have lasted longer than a year.
Well, we're going to talk about the mistakes.
Because when it fell off, it fell right off and went away and has not come back in 10 years since. So like all this talk about the culture and the locker room and the this, that, and the other thing, it's like, well, okay, yes, but Dustin Penner was not the player they hoped that he would be.
Sure.
Mike Richards was not the player that they hoped he would be. They fired their coach. They did have to go out and get a bunch of, Marian Gaborik, we spoke to him last year at the reunion, told us a story that I'd never heard before. He was on the verge of retiring. Like, he thought he was done when the Kings brought him in. So, I mean, it's not like it was this brilliant master class in planning and strategy. They made mistakes, and they were fortunate enough to be in a situation where they had flexibility and opportunity to correct their mistakes on the fly. And that's the danger that the Sharks face right now, is that if you lock yourself into too many big contracts too soon and you make a mistake, then you can't change course on the fly. And
you bring up a really good point, Jesse, because if Mike Reaves talked about this the last couple of seasons, where he's like, I'm not giving term to players yet, and I'm not ready to give long-term contracts out. And sort of what he says is like, until I know that this core is ready to take the next step. And I think you bring up a very good point about, being able to keep your organization somewhat flexible, to pivot depending on what you have, and not giving those long-term contracts out too early, and not locking yourself in. And even this current deal with Eklund, this bridge deal is sort of that as well. So really good point.
I mean, I just think it's the most important thing. And, I'm currently engaged in this fight with a bunch of Kings fans online at the moment, because I like to fight with people online. But I just think flexibility is crucial, because you can't know the future, right? And things change in this league, and they change so fast. What worked today, you put 3 guys together, and all of a sudden you've got a line, and you're like, oh, this is incredible. This is our next line for the next whatever. And then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, who knows, it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
And you gotta pivot. And if you don't have enough guys to rotate your forwards around to make new line combos that might work, what are you supposed to do? And if you have a goalie who all of a sudden gets injured or something, that could be it right there. So flexibility for me is the most important thing.
I think going back to the idea, though, of being honest about your players internally, though. So want to kind of bring this example, and also to Jack Ferrara gave me an interesting anecdote about it too. But anyway, so let's go back a little bit to the Kings. And again, we're focused on just the Sharks getting to the next step, but just some relevancy. So June 2006, the Kings are breaking apart a mediocre team. They were right.
Very polite way of putting it.
Well, yes, they got off to a good start the year before. That was the first lockout year, but then they kind of sputtered, right? So Dean Lombardi takes over, and this was a move that made sense at the time. But then they realized, hey, the player that we acquired isn't really that remarkable. So anyway, June 2006, and I love the video of this when Gary Bettman announces this deal at the draft. That's the crowd goes ooh and ah, because I think the draft was in Minnesota. So anyway, Dean Lombardi trades Pavel Demitra to the Minnesota Wild, and Pavel Demitra, rest in peace, was still a point per game player, kind of in the prime of his career. And so they traded him to the Wild for a first round pick and Patrick O'Sullivan, who was a top prospect at the time. So anyway, look up that video of Gary Bettman. But let's fast forward to 3 years later. O'Sullivan
just time out real quick, as long as we're talking about honesty about players. He was a point per game player, but the per game, he played 58 games.
Oh, Demitra, he still was a good player as a point.
No, for sure. But I'm just saying,
small sample size.
Yeah.
Well, he got hurt.
He was good in St. Louis before that too, but that's neither here nor there. And if he wasn't good, you're not getting a first-round pick, and you're not getting Patrick O'Sullivan.
No, for sure. I'm just saying it's not like they jettisoned a superstar.
He wasn't.
Sorry, all right.
Yeah,
sorry.
It was an indication though of Lombardi and what he was doing. Though he wasn't going to try to string along a mediocre Kings team in 2006. So anyway, 3 years later, March 2009, O'Sullivan is productive, but he is a one-dimensional player, I would say. So Lombardi moves him for Justin Williams, who is 27, who is 4 years older than O'Sullivan, and actually is also in the middle of 2 injury-plagued seasons. And I remember as a Kings fan back then, Jesse, you remember Kings fans hated this deal because this is you're trading a 23-year-old guy that you think is going to be part of the future of the team for this guy who is he broken down? Is he what? And so anyway, Jack Ferreira told me that in his opinion, the Kings, that they had an honesty about their players, that they could say, okay, we like this Patrick O'Sullivan. He did good things for us, but he wasn't going to be a fit. And even you mentioned some of the other players where the Kings made mistakes. Sure, they made mistakes, right? But they also were able to get out of those mistakes to some degree. And some of them were mistakes you understand, some of them you don't understand. But anyway, one thing that Jack mentioned to me was that he asked other GMs to evaluate his team, and the other GMs refused. I found that really interesting. He told me that story. I can't mention the GMs. They're very, very prominent GMs back in the day, but I found that interesting, though. Like, that is an interesting exercise to ask if you trust this other GM. He's your friend. Ask him, hey, what do you think of my team? Also, something else that Jack mentioned, and I can't specify the player here, but sometimes you make mistakes. You hear great things about a player. You don't know him internally, but you hear great things. He has a great reputation. You trade for him, and then you find out, and this is Jack's words, you find out he's a phony. And this is not talking about Mike Richards at all, by the way. I want to make clear that. But anyway, that happens, right? And then you make your mistake and you move on. Another example of this is the Kings when they traded Jack Johnson for Jeff Carter. When the Kings traded for Jack Johnson in, 2009 or whatever, everyone thought, Jack motherfucking Johnson, he's going to be number one defenseman for the next decade. And he wasn't. The Kings said, okay, we thought he might be this. He wasn't that, but he still has value. So let's get something for him. Obviously, they got a lot for him. So
can I jump in and just
final point?
Final
point, though, it's Sharks' relevance here is that I think that for the Sharks, this matters that there are no sacred cows with their prospects.
Yeah.
Be it like lower level prospects like Henry Thrun or Dio Gushin, or it could be a William Eklund or Will Smith one day. So this is a relentless, merciless process in a lot of ways to get your, whatever, Jesse, you mentioned that the delicate balance that the Kings had, it held together for 3 years, basically 3 straight years where they were in the finals or conference finals, and then it kind of fell apart, right? But to do that, though, there was a lot of steps for Dane Lombardi and company to take to get there. And one of the things that I do think the Kings, again, they made their mistakes, but they also didn't hold on to guys. Well, they were able to get rid of guys and get some value back for them, at least for the most part.
And I just wanted to add too, I think that's a mark of any great GM, which is one that can avoid what, behavioral economics people would call sunken cost fallacy, where you're invested in this player and you're like, now I'm going to ride this thing all the way to the end, when you got to cut your losses. And like you guys have been talking about, being honest with your players. And I think that's a mark of any good GM in any sports. And we've talked about this, but, I have some opinions on Doug Wilson and his lack of ability to do that and cut those losses when he had the opportunity. But sounds like in that Justin Williams trade, bringing some light to that. I really hadn't thought about it because, the only time we saw Justin Williams in postseason, you're like, this guy's nasty, especially in Game 7. So, but at the time of the trade, that's really interesting.
So it's important not to have any golden cows in players, but Sheng, I would also argue that it's important to remember that when it comes to executives as well.
Oh, fair. Yeah.
And I know Jack well, and I like Jack, and Jack was always incredibly kind to me, but I'm sure Jack didn't mention Patrick O'Sullivan's childhood or his relationship with his father when talking about him. And if either of you have read his book, it's horrifying
Oh,
stuff.
it is. Absolutely,
I mean,
yeah.
just horrifying. And it
Yeah.
includes Mark Crawford physically abusing him while he was on the bench in a Kings game, which is just mind-blowing to an insane degree. And so you say something sort of casually and dismissively like, well, it wasn't working out here. And you go, well, yeah, no kidding. You have a guy who was abused by his father, drafted as a teenager, brought in, developed by a club, and then who was also his employer. And then while trying to figure out how to continue growing up and mature as an adult while also juggling a weird relative level of fame and prosperity in a city, thousands of miles away from his home, he has, the person in charge of his career screaming at him and kicking him when he's on the bench. So I go yeah, okay, it probably didn't work out. But could it have? I don't know, maybe. And also, full disclosure, I thought O'Sullivan was going to be better than Kopitar and was pissed at the trade for Williams. So I was wrong about that. Very wrong.
And in fairness to what your overall point, it was Dean Lombardi that hired Mark Crawford. So,
yes.
WTF, right? So.
Well, that's why I say we have this idea that and also there are moves that are made that are the right move on day one, and then maybe are not the correct move later. When the Kings acquired, and I'm sorry to constantly talk about the Kings, it's just what I know. When the Kings acquired Brendan Lemieux a few years ago, it was for a very specific set of reasons. And I personally believe that when he was brought in, he was the right player, and he addressed all those reasons. They talked about needing to get louder in the locker room, tougher on the ice, When they wound up trading him away, they traded a 5th-round pick with him to get Zach McEwen. And they did not resign Zach McEwen in the offseason. So you go, all right, well, if Brendan Lemieux and Blake Lizotte and Arthur Kaliyev, weirdly enough, combined to make a really excellent 4th line that helped them get into the playoffs one season. Well, a few years later, for whatever reason, he wasn't the right fit anymore. And so as teams evolve and teams change, things happen. And what the right player is today may not be the wrong player tomorrow, which, just to backtrack again, is why flexibility is so important. And you need the ability to make changes as situations change, because coaches are going to get fired, players are going to get hurt, fits are going to change. You mentioned Jack Johnson, Sheng, and I don't want to suggest that this situation had anything to do with his playing career, but who could have ever foreseen what happened with his folks?
Sure.
Right. And you can't tell me that sort of thing doesn't weigh on a person and change. So, who knows? Right. And, players have personal lives and stuff happens, and you just can't know, things, listen, in February, I didn't think I was going to get diagnosed with cancer, and it totally changed everything about my life. And I'm a totally different person today than I was in January. And you just got to be able to pivot. But hockey teams are very, I frequently compare them to cruise ships. If somebody goes overboard on a cruise ship, part of the reason it's so important to figure it out right away is because it takes forever to turn that thing around. You just don't have time to deal with it. So if the Sharks lock up the wrong guys to long-term deals, and you only find out it's the wrong guy and the wrong deal 3 years down the road, well, it might take you another 3 years to correct for that. So it's tough.
Yeah. And you do bring up a great point that I don't mean to suggest that. I mean, we're not here to mythologize what the Kings did. They made a lot of mistakes.
Yes,
I think we're talking about more that they made enough of the right moves to get. I mean, there's no doubt that what Dean Lombardi inherited in his organization, that was not a good situation. And that he was able to move them from a rebuild to the playoffs to a Stanley Cup. And along the way, you make a lot of mistakes, but you make enough of the right moves. And I think that it's like scouting in a draft, right? Like, you're going to miss on, if you hit 300 when you're scouting in a draft, you've done really well. You can have a lot of misses.
Let me ask you about the Sharks real quick.
Yes.
Sorry, how many years did Vlasic have left on his deal?
They had 1 year left.
That's a move I don't understand.
Oh, they're just playing a roster space, basically.
Why?
Because they want to bring in Sam Dickinson in.
Okay, but the team's not going to be any good this year, right? I mean, I don't mean
but it doesn't matter. The cap, it doesn't matter. The team won't be good next year too, so the cap, it doesn't matter. So it's about just the roster space more than anything.
But the Sharks don't have any. There's 7 spaces for a defenseman. The Sharks don't have any space for a Vlasic.
apparently not in their estimation. So they have 7 kind of maybe mediocre defensemen who are less mediocre than Vlasic, and they have a young defenseman in Sam Dickinson that they really want to break in. So.
All right. Well, I don't get that move, but that's just me. And also, I don't like the Sharks, so I'm prone to finding things to complain about.
All right. So anyway, let's get to number 3 on my list again.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So five things that the Sharks can kind of take from the Kings to move out from the rebuild to the playoffs. So number 1, we already talked about, learn to play some fucking defense. Number two is be honest about your players. So if you had to basically don't have any sacred. I say this to the fans too. So don't fall in love with any players because, well, they're not going to. There's a good chance they're not going to be around in a couple of years, especially if the Sharks get to the point of being really good. So anyway, number 3 on my list is don't underestimate the intangibles, which I know is going to a huge collective groan from a lot of Sharks fans. But okay, so Kings example that I have here is that by a lot of statistical measures, if you look back at this trade, trading defenseman Lubomir Visnovsky for Jarret, Stoll, and Matt Greene was not a good trade. Now, for a very, very bad Kings team, Visnovsky was arguably the best player for a couple of years there. Offensive guy, was a willing defender. He was gutty for a small guy. You can count on him for about 50 points or so. Anyway, Visnovsky had a career season 3 years later after the trade, 2010-11, dropping 68 points for the Ducks. So looking back at Jarret, Stoll, and Matt Greene, you look at the numbers, they don't look great in comparison. Jarret, Stoll was more of they were much younger than Visnovsky, though, which is a big part of your point of support guys who are more in the age range of the guys that you're trying to build a franchise around. They were both, I think Matt Greene and Jarret Stoll were mid-20s, 26, 27 in that range. But anyway, some background. Stoll was more of a 3C when the Kings got themselves back to the playoffs. And Greene was one of the best sort of bottom pairing defensemen in the league. Their roles evolved over time. By the time the Kings were winning Stanley Cups, Stoll was more of a 4C, but a really good one. Anyway, talk to anybody about them. They were a combination of tenacious competitors, great room guys, essential ingredients for a cup winner. They were leaders, even though they weren't necessarily scoring a point per game or playing 25 minutes a night. And so anyway, the Sharks' relevancy for this is, in a small way, it could be the Ryan Reaves for Henry Thrun deal, which is not a great on the ice deal. Henry Thrun is a young defenseman, maybe some growth potential in him, but he plays 15 minutes a night, whatever. Ryan Reaves, if he plays 7-8 minutes a night, you're lucky if he does that, right? But this is a deal for intangibles. You weren't losing anything in Henry Thrun that you can't replace. Obviously, they bought Vlasic too. They didn't bother keeping Vlasic around, and they got rid of Thrun. And Ryan Reaves does bring sort of a locker room presence and that sort of energy to the room, a kind of confidence and swagger that the Sharks do not have. Now, does that mean more wins next year? I don't know. Does that mean the Sharks are going to make the playoffs? Absolutely not. But these are little things that, again, don't show up in the stats, but they do matter. And so anyway, Jesse.
Reaves is 38.
Yeah.
That's all I got on that one.
Okay.
I mean, he's 38.
Well,
whatever.
I'm asking you about the Kings here, though. So.
No, it's just, I mean, you know, the Visnovsky trade was shocking because, you know, he was the player that you described. He had been the first defenseman, I think, to lead the Kings in scoring in franchise history, 2 or 3 years before the trade. And yeah, to trade him for 2 bottom six forward and a bottom pair defenseman. Although I think when they brought Stoll in, maybe like theoretically the thought was that he could be a 2C.
Yeah, he was a little more middle six.
Didn't work out, but but either way, you know, if you talk to the management group that was around at the time, I think they would tell you that they were convinced that Stoll and Greene were exactly as you described them. And, you know, listen, Matt Greene may have been a third pair defenseman, but he wore a letter the entire time. So, you know, and, you know, at the last 3 years, the Kings have had 2 anniversary parties to celebrate the winning of the Stanley Cup back in 12 and 14. They invited all the players, all the coaches, all the front office staff, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Stoll and Greene are the guys who organized it. Stoll and Greene, like, they're still there. They're both on the development staff. It's important to have human beings like that on your roster. And I would argue that first of all, I should say this right off the bat. I am an enormous Matt Greene homer. I have the deepest respect for him as a person, and I spoke to him one night and told him I was terrified of him, and just he was like, "What? Why?" And I was like, "You're, first of all, I think he's 6'4" or something, and I've recently discovered
I've seen him scout as a scout.
Yeah, he's huge.
At games.
He's huge, and he's wickedly intelligent, and I don't think that he likes to show it off. And so people that are physically imposing, mentally imposing, and he doesn't, he's not a big flexer, right? Like, yeah, he's 6'4" and he will, pummel you if they called for it, but he's not like a jerk about it. He's not, showing up in t-shirts that are 8 sizes too small to show off the guns, right? So, I mean, he's just very unassuming, and I just really like Matt Greene is the point. I'm a huge Matt Greene stan. But anyway, the point is, I don't think Matt Greene knows how to play hockey incorrectly. I think there are some players that when you coach them, you have to tell them, okay, if you are a defenseman and your body is between the goalie and the shooter and a shot comes in, here's the position to take in order to block the shot. Here's what you have to do. Matt Greene blocks a shot with his face, and I don't think it's a conscious decision. I don't think that he has the ability of processing that thought. I think it is instinctual. I think it's a part of his personality. I'm a firm believer in the expression that adversity reveals character. It doesn't build it. And Stoll and Greene are character guys. I don't know about Ryan Reaves well enough to comment on if he's that kind of player or not. I just know that he's 38 and he doesn't play a full season, and that the debates about him as to whether or not he's actually a valuable asset from a hockey standpoint continues to rage on. I get it. He's a knuckle basher. He's a face puncher. And if the Sharks feel that that is a need that they need to address, perhaps he will embolden younger players to adopt that mentality, but you're not going to see a world where Macklin Celebrini is a 5-time All-Star where Ryan Reaves is still on the roster. Like, he's 30.
Yeah. Well, thinking about another sort of example in terms of recent Sharks trades that when we were going through this point that kind of came to mind for me was Zetterlund for Ostapchuk. So Fabian Zetterlund going out for Zach Ostapchuk, and you're really getting, I think, more of those intangibles. And Jesse, to your point, some of that compete, and not just looking at how many points or goals a player has. And I don't know, Sheng, do you think that's a fair analogy to this point?
It could be if Ostapchuk is what the Sharks envision. One thing you hear about Ostapchuk that is unusual when the Sharks traded for him that you rarely hear a GM talk about for about a 21-year-old player, even if they're trying to talk them up, is Mike Greer said consistently, Ostapchuk, he plays the right way. He plays with detail. Now, what does that detail mean to your average hockey fan? I'm not really sure, but we'll see if he can be that type of guy. But if he can be kind of, if we want to use the Jarret Stoll example, like a poor man's Jarret Stoll, then I can understand why the Sharks might make such a trade, even though Ostapchuk never produces at a Jarret Stoll level, at Jarret's best, or at a Fabian Zetterlund level. Fabian Zetterlund scored over 20 goals for the Sharks last year or 2 years ago. He led the Sharks in goals. But I think that is kind of what Mike is trying to go for. So we talk about don't underestimate the intangibles. I think Ostapchuk is a very good example of what the Sharks are trying to do. So we'll see if he gets there. He still has to be able to play hockey, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, that takes us to point 4 on this list of 5. And this one, we've heard a million times, but your best players have to be your best leaders.
And I want to expand on this too, because okay, so obviously when you look at the Sharks, right, and everyone sees Macklin Celebrini, he has all the earmarks to be a leader, someone who's going to drag the Sharks forward. Hopefully, William Eklund's going to be in on it too. Look at the Kings, the clear guys that stand out: Anze Kopitar, Jonathan Quick, Drew Doughty. These were all leaders. These are all guys who did it over the summer too. But one thing that, and I think Jesse actually touches on this, and something that when I asked Jack Ferrara I had Jack look at my list of 5 things, and he didn't say anything angry to me. So I take that as Jack, a bit of a curmudgeon. We love him. So that he didn't scowl at me means that okay, we have some sense that I'm in the right direction and path here. But one thing that Jack said is that everybody was a leader on the best of those Kings teams. So That is Jarret Stoll. That is Matt Greene. I mean, all these guys that they acquired, that is Justin Williams, right? I'm not even talking about the guys that they win the Stanley Cup with, but the guys that they acquired more of those kind of guys as they got themselves back to relevancy, back into the playoffs. And I love the example, Jesse, that you used with Matt Greene and how he doesn't know how to play the game in the way that is, he just plays the right way, just automatically, right? And so this is exactly what Jack said, that nobody took a shift off from day one. Those are the kind of players that the Kings had acquired by and large up and down the lineup. And the Sharks are not anywhere close to that. And so that's where we start talking about intangibles. And it's not just about the goals and the points and all that kind of stuff, right? It's not just about eating minutes. It's about, do you have that attitude that nobody takes a shift off? It's automatic. You block a shot with your face. That's automatic. And that's what you need throughout your organization. And of course, like Jesse mentioned, salary cap and all that kind of stuff, you can't keep all those guys. You lose those guys. You need to kind of try to replace those guys. Sometimes a bargain. Sometimes you take a chance on a guy. Sometimes it works out, like Marian Gaborik. A lot of times it doesn't work out. Like, I don't know, Dustin Penner, right? We talked about Dustin Penner here. So anyway, though, I think, though, that Jack is talking about sort of and we're talking about sort of like the ideals of what you're trying to get to, though. And so I do think that this is a very important one that, okay, I started with saying your best players have to be your leaders, but I'm going to give a nod to Jack here that all your players have to be leaders, the best you can.
Yeah, I'm going to backtrack again to something I said earlier, though, which is, and I don't want to just bash the team that I follow and love, but it's just super convenient for people who were involved with that club to talk about it as if it was all intentional and beyond reproach. And I don't disagree that in 2012, they bashed everybody. And in 2014, they came back and won 3 Game 7s on the road. It was an incredible team and deserves credit and respect and memory. But if everybody was a leader and it was this incredible culture and incredible design, then why did they miss the playoffs for the next year and then get beat by the Sharks in 5 games in 16, miss the playoffs in 17, get swept in 18, and the wheels totally fall off the wagon in 19 and they go into a rebuild?
Sure. No,
I mean, fair. It's like, yes, okay, the team, yes, everybody was a leader in 2012. Well, what happened in 2013 when a couple of those leaders got hurt? They got beat by the Blackhawks. And yes, I understand it was the Blackhawks, and Blackhawks are incredible. And then they come back and won in 14. But like, okay, why'd they miss the playoffs in 15? If everybody's a leader, you should be able to replace the occasional missing player. And it didn't happen.
Well, so, I would argue, though, that this is a year-to-year thing we're talking about, though.
Yes,
like,
and like leadership is important.
You catch that lightning in a bottle, and then there's that you win, right? And then some players grow a little complacent. That can happen, right? I'm not saying that happened with the Kings necessarily, but that does happen, right? And so it's a delicate kind of thing here. And
I'm just saying, I agree with your first statement. Yeah. I think your best players do need to be your leaders. Yeah. Trying to get everybody to be a leader is dangerous, and believing that it's possible. Yeah. Well, just because I listen, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on my own personal stuff, but I had a therapist one time tell me that there are 3 kinds of people. There are leaders, there are followers, and there are observers. And, I know enough about myself to know that I'm not a leader, right? When I was in Boy Scouts, my friends kept electing me troop leader or patrol leader, excuse me. And I was lazy and didn't like scouts, so I never earned any merit badges. And finally, the troop stepped in and said, you're not allowed to be a patrol leader unless you advance past the rank of 2nd class scout or something like that. And so I quit. I just said, okay, well, I'm not going to be bullied into caring more about the scouts than I do. And if you don't want me to be in the leadership council as well. So not everybody's a leader, but sure, in the right circumstances with the right leadership, I can be cajoled into following and into being a good follower. And that's another part of the delicate balance of professional sports that a lot of people I don't think want to deal with, but that has to be dealt with. You do need to worry about locker room chemistry and leaders and glue guys and followers and good soldiers and everything. And if you pay Macklin Celebrini, I'm sorry, it's the one guy I know for sure on the team. If you make Macklin Celebrini the captain because he's unquestionably the best player on the team, And if you give him $13 million a year starting in his 4th season for 7 years, and it turns out that he's not a leader, and, you know, let's just say Eklund is the actual leader in the locker room, and you wind up trading Eklund for whatever reason, not you personally, but if the team does. And if you're one of the guys on the roster who, for whatever reason, doesn't get a contract extension, or finds out one of his friends has to be traded because the money's going to the wrong guy, and the coach favors the player who's the star, who's wearing a letter, like, all that stuff matters. When the Kings signed Kovalchuk in, what was it, 18, I think, everybody was, one of the reasons everybody was such a fan of it was because they said, well, it's not a trade. Kings need offense. You're getting a guy who used to be able to score, and you're not giving up any roster players for him. You're only bringing him in for whatever the, you know, contract was. And I looked at it and I said, that's not true, because signing him to the contract you sign him to pushes you up against the cap, and you're signing him past this season, and you have guys at the end of this season who are up for contract extension. It was basically, signing Kovalchuk basically meant that at the end of the year, one of, if not more, Toffoli, Pearson, Martinez, and Muzzin had to be let go, because they were going to need contract extensions and there wasn't going to be room for it. So signing Kovalchuk, in essence, meant you were trading one of those 4 players. Now, you got him for a year, so that's fine. But if I was one of those players, and I haven't spoken to any of them about it, I don't know, this is just speculation on my part. But if I'm Tanner Pearson or Jake Muzzin or one of the guys that's friends with those guys, and you bring in Kovalchuk and sign him to a 3-year deal at $6 million or whatever it was, and it means that one of us has to leave, and we won the cup in 14, and we just took Vegas, you know, held them to 1-goal games in 4 games. And yes, I understand it's a sweep and everything, but, you know, this is the team that won the cup and we've still pretty good and everything. That would piss me off, right? Like, that would upset me, and that would, I would think, be totally capable of disrupting a room. And I only bring it up so bluntly because that season, 18-19, is when the wheels fell right off. And I just don't think you can say, well, people always have this fight with me where you look backwards and you go, well, this didn't work, and here's all the ways it didn't work. And then people look at history of, like, a very clear history of things not going well, and they go, yeah, well, but if. And I go, yeah, but I'm not, yeah, well, but ifing a moment in history. I'm reverse engineering what actually happened. The wheels fell off, and it started, you know, here. So I don't know what the point of all that was. I'm just griping about the Kings now. But I think you have to be very careful about who you designate, not just as a leader, but also wearing a letter, getting the big money is important. Chemistry is hard. It's a hard part of the game.
Yeah, all the Sharks' head. It's maybe that's your yes. podcast, but
yeah, there you go.
I did want to add to the overall point that I think that, you know, you have Jack saying that everybody needs to be a leader, and that's sort of the platonic ideal, but that's obviously hard, right? So my experience as a teacher might be more relevant to what you're talking about. That the first day I walk into the classroom, I know there's going to be 5 teachers' pets. There's going to be 10 people in between. And there's going to be 5 people that hate me on site. And so what you need to do is that you need obviously you need the 5 people on your side, but they need to influence the 10, and the 5 who hate you need to be pacified. And so that locker room might be a little bit like that. And so in this case, then maybe the 5 teachers' pets, they have to be so strong. They need to be Sidney Crosby. They need to be Connor McDavid. They need to be hopefully Macklin Celebrini one day, where everyone's like, okay, this is no one messes around with this guy and what he says. And that brings those 5 that might be malcontents in the wrong situation, that they stay on course. And obviously the 10 who are influenced more easily into followers, as you say, that they're going to go along with the top dog too. And so anyway, that just goes to your point a little bit.
I hate to reference TikTok at my age, but I have to do it. There was this TikTok I saw, and it was an NFL executive talking about who they drafted. And they said they had an option, and everybody thought they were going to take player A, and they wound up taking player F. And the question was, why not take player A? He's clearly the better player. And the guy said, player A is going to go out at 3 a.m. and he's going to take 10 players with him. And they're going to get drunk, and they're going to be out too late, and some of them might miss curfew, and he's not going to have a good workout. Yes, he's unquestionably the more talented athlete, but player F is going to stay home. And more importantly, he's going to stop those 10 guys from going out. And he's not going to hurt you on the field. He might not be as talented or as gifted, but
yeah,
ripple effect. And I think this point to both your guys' point, what I think is really interesting about it is I do believe that your best players do have to be your best players, but they also have to dictate the culture. And then the organization has to do a good job of sort of rejiggering the team to sort of, promote and demote players that align with that culture and identify it. And I think that's actually a good pivot to the fifth point. And the final point of the 5, which is, unheralded prospects have to become impact players. And Sheng, I'll let you expand on this, but relating to the previous point is I think, and even going back to the sunk cost fallacy, you have to give the opportunity to players that are on the rise and give them opportunities if you see someone in your pool performing better than they should. So Sheng, I'll let you expand on this 5th point.
Well, yeah. So we talk about the Kings part of it, that it's not just about your lottery picks. Of course, everybody remembers the ones that hit, right? Andre Kopitar and Drew Doughty. But as anyone remember, Thomas Hickey, I think is the 4th overall pick of 2007, the Patrick Kane draft. So, and there's other guys like that we could look back on for the Kings, and we will look back on with the Sharks that will not hit, who were top picks. So you're going to miss on some top picks. That's it. That's happens to the best of them. You can give the best scouting director a top 10 pick every year. They're gonna miss on a few of them. So you need your unheralded picks. You need your Jonathan Quick, 2005 number 72 pick, 2007 number 61 Wayne Simmons to become impact players. Jesse, you mentioned Voinov, who was a 2nd round pick. And so anyway, with Quick and Simmons, obviously Quick, leader, top goalie, all that stuff, right? Simmons was eventually able to bring a player with enormous reputation like Mike Richards to LA. I know we debated a lot about Richards, but people, I think, forget just what kind of get he was in the summer of 2012. This was a huge, huge get. So no one really foresaw how precipitous his decline would be. So, and that's something that Wayne Simmons and Braden Shen was another big part of that deal, that Simmons had built his reputation enough to be an important part of that deal. So for the Sharks' relevancy here, so is it going to be a 2nd rounder like Chernyshov? Is it going to be a 4th rounder like Cagnoni? So it's not going to be just about your top 10 picks. So, and to Zubair, to your point, it also will be the Sharks needing to recognize that, hey, this guy has moved ahead out of the guy that we thought was going to be a star 3 years ago. But we got to give Cagnoni, we got to give Eric Polkamp or somebody like that. Yeah, there you go. Right?
I was hoping for the shout out for my boy.
Yeah, well, I mean, that sort of goes back to what I was talking about as far as the timing of it all, right? Because you've got Macklin Celebrini, who's 18, and fortunately, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but there's nobody standing in his way to become, if he isn't already, the number 1 seed for the Sharks, right?
Yeah, nobody.
Right.
Well, so you bring up a point. Yeah, no, there isn't, but I would love to see like Michael Misa give him a run for his money for the number 1 seed. I don't think it's gonna, but
but they're roughly the same age. But I just mean there's no 32-year-old who's just there. Like Joe Thornton isn't still there where you go, come on, he's a legend. It's Jumbo Joe. Like you can't, and all of a sudden, your future superstar number 1 C is just sort of languishing on the bench. So
we sign Mick Jesus next year.
Oh well, get in line. I don't know if you guys saw the Eklund rumor, but I had to explain to some of the younger people.
Hockey Buzz Eklund, not William Eklund.
Yes, sorry.
You need to explain that too.
Yeah. I had to explain to some of the younger people that work for the Kings who Eklund was, because they were like, "What is this bum talking about?" And I was like, "Bum? That's like, I mean, yes, he's a bum, but he's still Eklund." Anyway,
Hockey Buzz is actually part of the reason why. Side note, Hockey Buzz is one of the reasons why I'm still not in LA covering the Kings, as was the goal back in the day. But that's another side story. So go ahead, Jesse.
No, I just, not having people in place to hold your superstar players back is part of it, and giving those support players the chance to grow into their roles is important as well, right? So I'm sorry, I've forgotten the names you mentioned already. One of them started with a P, I think. Podorowski, was that who you're talking about?
Polkamp.
Sorry, Polkamp.
Yeah, he's a lower prospect that we signed, and he's been on the rise ever since. And I like
the Sharks haven't signed him yet. Just minor correction.
All right.
They drafted him, but anyway, yeah.
But I mean, having, not having it to bring up the earlier 4 points, not having any sacred cows, being honest about who the players are, right? Even though I was crinkling my nose at the Vlasic thing, right? Like, okay, move a guy like Vlasic out, right? You say, okay, you have the opportunity. We paid him too much money for however many years. There's 1 year left. We can eat the loss on it. And so, okay, right? So let's get these young players the chance to play the minutes, fully understanding that not every forward is going to be a top 6 forward or a top line forward, and not every defenseman is going to be a top pair defenseman, right? Like you still need 20 guys on the ice in any given game. 19, I guess, with a backup goalie, but yeah. So, I mean, having the room to let guys grow into very specific roles is important.
So we're going to move into, I'm going to ask Jesse if he has any extra thoughts, but I just wanted to kind of do a quick recap before I ask Jesse if he has any more to the 5 bullet points. So just review it really quickly. So number 1, learn to play defense. Number 2, internally organization. You have to try your best to be honest. You're going to make mistakes still, but try your best to be honest about your players. Don't fall in love with anybody. Number 3, don't underestimate the intangibles. Number 4, okay, we'll go back to the original. Your best players have to be your leaders. They're going to impact everybody else. And finally, number 5, inherited prospects have to become impact players. So anyway, the question for you to close, Jesse, is, so those Kings, again, we're not talking about 2012, the Stanley Cup victory. We're talking about the in-between time. So anything else that stands out to you that the Kings did do well that another organization can emulate, from the couple of years of the rebuild under Mark Crawford that Dean Lombardi started, to hiring Terry Murray, to finally making the playoffs in 2010 for the first time in, I think it had been like 7 years for the Kings at that point or something like that.
So one of the executives, sorry, go ahead, Zubair. Sorry.
Just want to say one thing. If you say successfully execute a reverse sweep, I'm never speaking to you.
No.
The source.
No.
Right? No.
I mean, look, playing in a division with a garbage team like the Sharks is helpful. No, I'm just kidding. No, look, one of the executives that I would consider myself friends with of those Kings teams used to tell me, well, still does, I guess. He would say there were 3 things that they were doing, and he's never met anybody that correctly identified all 3 of them. Or maybe there were 5, but I think it was 3. Anyway.
Oh, okay.
And he said, like, people take a stab at some of the obvious ones, like, okay, get big players. Yes. Size was obviously an element. And, focus on possession. Yes. Okay. It's obvious, right? Like the Kings prioritized possession in a way that maybe wasn't as widely accepted at that time, right? That's, like I said, it was the first I'd ever heard of Corsi, and then they happened to be the best team in the league at the time when Corsi went from being a sort of niche concept to the driving force. But I've always thought that one of the 3 pillars, and I haven't run this by him, so I hope I'm not saying anything that would piss him off.
Oh man, I would love to hear those 3 pillars one day. Or
me too, but they're not going to tell me. But one of the ones that I always speculated about was getting guys with something to prove.
Oh,
and
I think that's a good one. Yeah,
I think there's a difference between, and I always fumble the phrase that I came up with. There's a difference between guys that have something to prove and guys that are trying to prove themselves. If that makes any sense. And it sounds like the same thing, but like,
I think Justin Williams is a good example of this, but go on though. Yeah.
Yes. And so you want guys with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, because, Richards and Carter had been to the final and that team got blown up for dumb reasons. Greene and Stoll had been to the Cup final and that team had been blown up for stupid reasons. Williams won the Cup in Carolina, wound up, was he traded to Philadelphia after he won the Cup?
No, he was drafted by
So you know what I mean? But I mean, like, Williams was on his 3rd team and been jettisoned for injury reasons. Willie Mitchell was claimed off the scrap heap because people were like, well, he's banged up and concussions and, you know,
Right.
injuries and whatever. Rob Scuderi was they overpaid to get him, but he was, you know, a support piece on the Penguins and became the guy here. You know, Jonathan Quick, I don't know what he was. I don't know what chip he had on his shoulder.
Jonathan Bernier's job. It was Jonathan Bernier's job. Right?
Yeah.
And back then,
so, I mean, if you go up and down the roster and you just go like, wow, okay, these are, you know, that middle tier of players all had come so close in different places or had been, you know, sort of rejected or jettisoned by their club. And so aside from the cost control element, aside from the age and, you know, timelines and timing of it, I just think having guys who are hungry, for lack of a better phrase, I think that's probably helpful. I haven't ever sat down and really, like, you know, laid it out eloquently to anybody, but I always thought that might have been one of the key elements.
I think that's fantastic. And I think Justin Williams kind of fits in that, in the sense that Justin, we knew that Justin Williams was a good player. He had proven it with the Flyers. He had won a Stanley Cup with the Hurricanes, but then he got hurt. And people were like, "Oh, I don't know if he's good anymore."
I mean, his nickname was Mr. Glass when they acquired him in LA.
Was it really?
Right?
I forgot.
Yeah,
that.
People like me, listen, I was wrong. People like me were like, "What are we trading? You know, Patrick O'Sullivan, future All-Star, for this washed-up, beaten-down guy?" You know, because I can't remember how many games. But I mean, like, when Williams got here, I don't think he missed more than 5 games in the next 5 seasons or something. And even Gaborik, right? Like, when I spoke to Gaborik last year, and I found out that he was essentially done, right? He had sort of told his wife, like, I'm going to retire. I've had enough of this. I can't do it anymore. And she was like, well, you know, just play out your contract, give it a shot. And the Kings pick him up for 50% of his deal, and he was on his last legs. And look at him. He comes in and, you know, they reverse sweep the Sharks. Sorry, Zubair, I wasn't going to mention it, but now you put it in my head.
Kind of a funny story, actually, tangent a little bit. I showed this to Sheng. My best friend is from LA, and he was my best man, and he kept joking. I was like, "Hey, what are you gonna do for my speech?" He's like, "I'm gonna play the end of Game 7."
Oh no!
At your wedding, and I was like, "Ha ha ha ha!" And he's a lover of film, so we put this montage of film, and he actually slipped in the end of Game 7 at my wedding.
Listen, I was dating a Sharks fan at the time. It was a tough night for me. So.
But I wanted to go back to the point of players that, again, like you phrased it really well, players that aren't trying to prove themselves but have something to prove. But these players, coincidentally too, are also players that you can get slightly cheaper, and that matters in the cap era, right? So you talk about acquiring a middle class of player that's going to give you more than their contract value, which I don't think any Kings fan or any hockey fan would question that. Justin Williams did that for the Kings for a long time. Willie Mitchell did that for the Kings for a long time, right? So there are gambles, obviously, right, for the injury concerns, and they blow up in your face. But if they don't blow up, though, right, you get this player that is outperforming his contract, which is again so important in the cap era. So I think that point is really really outstanding one. That is actually a terrific sixth pillar for the Sharks to kind of target. As maybe it's going to be, I think the Sharks, maybe they found somebody in an Orlov, a guy like that, who was a legit number 2 defenseman for the Capitals 2018 when they won a Stanley Cup. And with the Hurricanes, he's been sort of tossed aside to some degree. He's still playing big minutes, but he wasn't on the power play like he wanted to be, right? And so he's a guy, maybe he can be that guy. I don't know. But that's the kind of guy, though, that, again, he can play. There's no question that Orlov can play, a Justin Williams can play. But a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, that's kind of what you need.
Yeah, fantastic observation.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, so that pretty much wraps up, some of the main things that we think to get it to the Sharks to where, they're back in we have some good California rivalries ahead again.
I mean, it would be nice because those days when the trip through California I can't remember what they called it, but you know, Death Valley.
Oh yeah,
it was. You know, it was the Ducks, the Kings, and the Sharks, and you'd be lucky to get out of there with 2 points. It was a lot of fun, especially since the Sharks never won a cup.
Oh, that's
friends like these, huh? Friends like these.
I will say, if I can, though, just one personal philosophy. It doesn't necessarily fit into the pillars or anything. An expression that I'm really fond of when I argue with people about team construction and everything is, I don't know anything about auto racing. I don't know anything about cars. I mean, and when I say nothing, I mean, I know how to put gas in my car and how to drive it to the Jiffy Lube to get an oil change. And that's
all you need to know.
It's about the end of it. But I do know this. You can spend all the time and energy and money you want on the engine of your car, right? When I hear people talk about F1 or NASCAR, and they're talking about the construction of the car and the, you know, the engineers that build these wonderful machines. But at the end of the day, if you don't have a steering wheel at all, you cannot race, never mind win a race. And I think when people talk about team construction, they spend a lot of time worrying about the engine, and they forget completely that you need a steering wheel. You need, you know, the Kings won the Stanley Cup with Brad Richardson and Nolan and Colin Fraser and Jordan Nolan on the roster, right? Like, these are not superstar players. These are guys where if you look back on it and you go, okay, well, who was the MVP of the 2012 Kings? You go, well, Jonathan Quick won the Conn Smythe. Okay, yes, Jonathan Quick was amazing. And, you know, Justin Williams won it in 2014, but it could have been Kopitar, it could have been Doughty, it could have been Gaborik, it could have been any number of guys, and all the guys were leaders, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. You go like, okay, but Keaton Ellerby, I think it was Keaton Ellerby. No, it wasn't Keaton Ellerby. It was the other defenseman who only played 7 games that playoff run. I'm blanking on his name, but the Kings had injuries.
Jeff Schultz.
Yes, thank you, Jeff Schultz. Yeah. But like, you need those guys. There may not be quote unquote as valuable in some sort of like very esoteric sports talky type conversation where you go, well, who's the most valuable? Who's the most important? Yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. But if you don't have those guys, you are not going to win. Like, period, the end. You need a steering wheel to drive your car. Doesn't matter how much money you spent on your tires. Doesn't matter how much money you spent on your engine. Doesn't matter what it looks like, the paint job, the upholstery. If you don't have a steering wheel, you're not going to win. There's a million pieces that go into a car. And there's 19 guys that go into making a hockey roster in any given night. And you need even more than that in your organization to make sure that you can pick the best 19 guys. So that's my general takeaway is I think management and the economics of the game get overlooked because people want to talk about sports the way that people can talk about basketball, not to take a swipe at basketball, but you know, basketball is just a much easier equation, right? You get a LeBron James, you get a Steph Curry, you get someone like that, Kevin Durant, and all of a sudden you have solved for a number of problems. Not all of them, and it's still complicated, and you still have to worry about a lot of the stuff. Smaller roster, smaller bench, it's easier. Hockey is just a lot more complicated. There's a lot more moving pieces, and it requires flexibility, vision, honesty, like you said in one of your pillars. Like, it requires all that.
And to your point, too, in the analogy with basketball, it's like if you get, you know, LeBron or something like that, they're playing, you know, 89% of the game.
Yeah, 48 minutes a night,
Yeah, you know, your best player in hockey is playing, you know, maximum like 45%, right? Like,
well, look at the 2000
shared with
the 2007 Ducks. One of the things they had going for them was that they had 3 defensemen, each of whom played 30 minutes a night. But like, I don't know, point to me another team that's ever done that. I can't think of one. Like, so yeah, it matters. Anyway, that's it. That's my rant. Sorry, I know you asked me to be short-winded, Sheng, but I can't help it.
Well, we have a problem because we have a clash here of I like to talk a lot too. So.
Yeah, sorry.
So don't apologize because otherwise I'd be apologizing all episode too.
And I'm the Intangibles, big glue guy.
Good.
Yes, exactly. Don't overlook that Dwight King right there. Okay, at the bottom there. Okay,
well, I mean, sorry. Now that you bring it up, I'm just going to go on another tangent. While I do think that some people overvalue the intangibles, we've reached this point now where like analytics people assume that the math is totally unbiased, and they forget all of the bias that goes into selecting the math or valuing what math gets applied to. And yeah, it's scary to me sometimes how people treat data as if it's infallible and without bias, and it's totally biased. It's just as biased as the eye test. To me, anyway.
You have to take all input variables to make the best decision. It's not.
Yeah. And every decision, like Sheng, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but I'm become a huge season 1 and 2 Ted Lasso truther. Okay, and as Ted Lasso said, all people are different people, all teams are different teams, all scenarios are different scenarios. I'm paraphrasing off of the all people are different people. And anyway, that's all I got. I'll let you guys let me go now.
Well, it is. I mean, it goes back to, it is sort of a strange elixir and balance. And when you get it for a couple of years, like the Kings did, the Blackhawks had it for a little longer, but still it was very, very finite. It just, you have it and then you don't have it. Right. And so it's hard. It's hard to get to, for sure. So anyway, Jesse.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'll shut up. Sorry.
No, go ahead. No.
Well, I was going to say, somebody was talking about the Panthers recently and talked about how they're, or I'll leave the Panthers alone. But like, I saw a post on Instagram, some goofy, sports aggregation graphics nonsense site, and it was ranking the teams into different tiers. And the top tier, the S tier, was like teams that are set up for the next 8 years.
Oh yeah, no,
I was like, 8 years? What are you talking about? 8 years? Like, no,
so far out.
In 2014, I was like, oh, the Kings are going to be a dynasty for 5 years, and they were done in one. Like 8 years.
Yeah, I mean, 2012, right? Like Drew Doughty is. I see he was like
24.
He was like 22 or 23.
That's crazy.
Right? Kopitar's. Yeah, you just think Jonathan Quick is in his mid 20s. So
yeah, stuff happens and it happens fast.
Yes. So if you get those couple of years, which obviously the Sharks haven't gotten yet in their history, you treasure that. So I know I keep saying I'm going to let me go. When the Kings won in 14, which was 2 for the team, I remember thinking, wow, Joe Sakic won the cup twice. Mike Modano won it once. Steve Yzerman won it, I think, 3 times. Yeah.
Mario Lemieux won it twice.
Yeah.
Wayne Gretzky only won it 4 times.
Oh, sorry, just correct. Was Yzerman 4? Wasn't he there for the 2007-08? I could be wrong about that one. Anyway, go on. I think
he was gone by that point. But Chris, there were guys that won it 4 times with Detroit. But anyway, the point is, like, if you're going to tell me that Joe Sakic won the cup twice, and Andrzej Kopitar won the Stanley Cup twice, and I'm supposed to feel mad about it because it only happened twice. Like, twice is pretty good. Twice is so. Yeah, it takes a lot. It takes a lot of things going right to get there. For your sakes, Zubair and Sheng, I will say I hope it happens to the Sharks, although I don't.
All right. Well, I'll end on this note. I one time have said Andrzej Kopitar, most underrated player of my generation.
I agree with that. I
still believe it. Yeah, I still believe it. Yeah. So, see, you're sending hate, and I'm giving you some love.
I appreciate it. Listen, Joe Thornton seems like a fantastic guy and a fantastic hockey player. That's all I got.
That would be a bar debate. And yes, I would trade Andrzej Kopitar for Joe Thornton. Or I would say Joe Thornton for Kopitar. Sorry, I reversed it. So sorry, Jumbo.
Oh, you're saying yeah. Okay, yes. Yeah. No, listen, I would take Andrzej Kopitar over Joe Thornton. No disrespect to Joe Thornton, but look, sports is goofy, and I don't like the Sharks, so I can't help it. But you guys seem all right.
That's a good bar fight, though. That's a good conversation. Yeah, over a drink. So
yeah. All right. Well, are you traveling with the team, Jesse?
No.
No? All right. Well, we're in LA. We'll grab a drink and chat some more.
If you're gonna be in Anaheim for the Golden State rookie tournament or whatever they're calling it, I'll be there for that. So
I'll be there for that. Cool. So I'll see you there.
That's gonna be in Irvine, right?
Yes. Yeah, which is fantastic building for the record.
Yeah. My nephew plays there. I've been out there. That thing's awesome.
It really is. Facility. Especially that I don't know what they call the 2,500 seat rink, but it's impressive.
Yeah.
Can you get
All right,
reception
cool.
there yet, though? The last time I was there, I couldn't get reception.
I couldn't tell you. It's been a while, but I'm sure they've sorted it out.
Cool. Well, thanks a lot, Jesse. This is great.
Thanks for having me.
Fantastic
I hope I
insights,
didn't make too much fun of the Sharks or talk too much about the Kings.
Hey, we'll get our laugh eventually when Doughty's like 50.
Yeah. And still playing.
That's pretty soon.
Still
Yeah.
playing.
Yeah.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, buddy.
Thanks for having me on. Nice meeting you,
sure.
Zubair. Nice seeing you, Sheng.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
All right.
Sheng, have fun in London.
Yep.
All right, boys. Till next time.
Bye, guys.
See ya.